Okay, hello everybody and good afternoon and welcome to our very exclusive lunchtime digital event live on Facebook. My name is Isha and I work at Charville Library as part of Hillingdon Library Services, and thank you so much for joining us today. And please do say hello in the comments and add any questions that you may have during our Q&A today for our very special guest, which leads me on very nicely to introduce her to you all. I'm so delighted to welcome the incredible thriller fiction author Egan Hughes, who is joining us today to discuss her latest novel, Leave the Lights On, which was published at the end of May this year. So hello, Egan, and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Isha. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Absolutely, and we're very excited to have you as part of our virtual events with authors. So thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who aren't too familiar with Egan, Egan has become one of the most exciting thriller crime fiction writers in recent years and has made a name for herself in the genre with her best-selling titles full of twists and thrilling suspense. She was born in North Devon and grew up in Hampshire and is now based on the south coast of England and works in marketing as a freelance copy editor in between writing thriller crime fiction. She is the acclaimed author of her best selling debut novel, The One That Got Away, an early version of which was shortlisted for the First Novel Prize and the 2017 Richard and Judy Search for a Bestseller competition. Today, she will be talking to us about her newly published spooky thriller, Leave the Lights On, of which I've got a copy right here, which certainly kept me on the edge of my seat. I finished reading it this weekend. If you have any questions for Egan during today's event, please write them in the comments. If you have already started reading the book and you can't wait to pick it up as your next read, please let us know as well. And I would try very hard not to reveal any spoilers today. So Egan, thank you again. And can you first tell us in your own words about Leave the Lights On?
It's about a couple who renovate a cottage in the countryside, and it's in quite a remote area. And the husband, Joe, has wired it up as a smart home because he's really into his technology. And his wife, Lauren, is less keen and she's a bit dubious about it. And strange things start to happen. But they only happen when Lauren's on her own.
Yes, that's right. So when Lauren is on her own, that's when things start to happen in this new smart home. Um, you bring the genre straight into the 21st century by setting the novel in the smart home, as you said. What inspired this idea?
Um, well, I actually got the idea for it when I was researching coercive control for my first book, because that had a theme of coercive control, and I was looking at the laws which were quite recent at that time to see how they would impact it. And I read this really chilling article about how people were starting to use smart homes as a tool of domestic abuse, and it stayed with me, and I kept thinking about how awful that was and how how you could really unsettle someone with that. And in this article, a woman was saying that she thought she was going mad because she kept hearing things and the doorbell would ring and no one was there, and it just really sort of took seed in my mind. And I wasn't even thinking about it as a novel. I was just thinking about how awful that was to have that destabilizing influence in your home and how I would cope with that. And it just kind of unspooled in my mind. And then at some point down the line, I thought, actually, I've got enough material here in my head with my own fears to write a book about it.
Wow, that's very interesting actually that you say that, because as I was reading, that's one thing, that kind of sense of someone controlling another person really comes through. And actually, one as you said, like one of the themes that you explore a lot, or sort of challenging experiences that you explore a lot in this book, is that of stalking and image-based sexual abuse, or more commonly known as revenge porn. And how did you find writing about these two very sort of uncomfortable and challenging themes, and how did you deal with those challenges in the writing process?
And I felt bad for putting Lauren through that, and I didn't want it to be gratuitous, but I wanted to show that it can happen to anyone if there's someone out there with a bad intent. It's not just people in the public eye who have stalkers and have revenge porn used against them. Not that people in the public eye deserve that to happen to them any more than someone living a quiet life in the countryside. And the thing is, there's so much technology now. Someone with a little bit of low know-how, it's easy to doctor images and use face swapping apps. I think I was unconsciously sort of tapping into my own fears and exploring, how far it could be taken and what a victim could do about it. Because the thing is, so much of it is the fear of it in your mind, even if it's not, it's something that's ever present, even if people might brush it off and say, oh well, it's not as if you're under any physical threat. But I wanted to really look at how Lauren tackled it, and there are no easy answers, because it's technology that's with us, and it will probably get more sophisticated. So it's a case of how we're all aware of that and how people can deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it felt really current, the issues that you're exploring in this book, along the lines of image-based sexual abuse, because it is something that, unfortunately, a lot of people are experiencing nowadays with, the kind of expansion and development of technology, and it is becoming more sophisticated, slicker, easier to inflict that damage on someone. And yeah, I really like the way you explored that and showed how traumatizing it is for somebody like Lauren, or a character like Lauren.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the trauma that Lauren experiences in the book, it's very, you deal with it in such a relatable and a very truthful way. Did you have to do any research to be able to present Lauren's trauma in the way that you did in the book?
Yes, well, mental health issues did feature in the book, because I wanted to explore how someone who perhaps has had mental health issues in the past, and now they're experiencing something that may well be passed off as paranoia, and what if that person isn't then believed, and how isolating that can be. So I looked into that quite a lot, and I did research stalking, and how with stalkers, sometimes they just carry on, and it can go on for years. And there've been cases where stalkers have gone to prison and they've come out and still reoffended, and just picked up where they left off. So it's going back again to that ever-present fear that even though they may not have a gun to your head or a knife to your throat, it's just the fact that someone's out there watching you, tracking you. They may not be physically outside your house, but they could be monitoring you through your devices. So it's just the fear factor of that. But yes, I did do a lot of research on the technological capabilities, and also the law and how it impacts people who are being stalked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that really comes across in the book, actually, and because there's a lot of detail as well about the technological, like how someone does that, using the technology, and then, as you said, the impact of that. And it reminded me of how I think for women who experience these forms of abuse, how they aren't believed anyway, and whatever form of abuse it takes. And it reminded me of that. I guess the victim blaming that happens a lot for women who experience abuse, and how, yes, other characters in the book pass it off as paranoia, the people around her, and yeah, and how damaging that can be to the victim.
Yes, very much so. And for instance, it's a case of how. Sorry, lost my thread there. Even her husband, he's so committed to the smart home and the technology that he wants to believe that she's imagining it. And often in these cases, women are afraid to go to the police because they think they won't be believed, or they just won't be investigated because it may not be taken seriously. These are all issues that we face. So it's an interesting subject that I wanted to delve into.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. I think there is still that challenge for women or people who experience abuse where, they go to the authorities and they're not believed, and it's dispiriting, and it allows the abuse to continue. But yeah, luckily that doesn't happen to Lauren too much. Not that I want to give anything too much away, but yeah, it was really, really interesting to read. And why did you choose to tell a thriller crime fiction story from the perspective of a woman? And how do you think this changes the perspective of the genre, or the perception of the genre?
I really wanted the reader to feel what Lauren was feeling, that sort of claustrophobia and the isolation and the not knowing. And because she started believing, she questioned whether she was actually imagining it, because so many people were telling her that actually, was it just in her mind? Was she being paranoid? So for me, that all kind of added to the effect of it, and I wanted to sort of get inside her head and sort of experience it with her, so that I could put it on the page. So it just seemed the most natural thing to write it from her point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really nice, actually. One thing I very much enjoyed with this book is that it is told from the perspective of a woman, this story, and especially in a genre that is quite dominated by male writers and centered around male protagonists. So it was really refreshing to read something that, a story that was centered around the experience of a woman, and I guess what made it quite disturbing, even more disturbing, is that this is a reality really for a lot of women, feeling like they're being followed or being targeted by somebody, and yeah, just how that affects you as a woman and the implications of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of a reminder that actually this kind of happens a lot in real life.
Yes. Yeah. So it was important for me to do it from the female perspective. I mean, it could have been done, say, more as a police procedural or sort of third person covering everyone's viewpoint, but it did feel very much that it was Lauren's story, and it should, really focus on her.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the offset, we quickly learn in the book that Lauren is a bit of a technophobe. And as you said earlier, she's a bit skeptical towards the concept of living in a smart home and having all these smart home gadgets in her house. And she's very clearly fearful of them. How much does that reflect your own views towards smart home technology? And do
Uh,
you feel the same as Lauren?
Yeah, very much. So I don't even have an Alexa, and I know smart home technology is designed to be fun and entertaining and to make life easier. And the thing is, life, most of us lead quite busy lives, and there's technology out there to make it so much simpler for us, and I'm all for that. But I don't like the idea of covert surveillance, and I think there is a risk involved when you invite all this technology into your home. And I wanted to explore that idea. And okay, I took it to the extreme, and what happens in the novel, wouldn't happen to most of us. But I think that's probably just because I'm a thriller writer, so I'm always imagining the worst that can happen. But yeah, I think there are issues really with how much that technology we have around us that could be used for listening in, watching us.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have to say, I'm similar to you. I'm not a massive fan of smart technology either, and I think for that reason, because it does add a sense of like you're being spied on, or someone can hack into your stuff, like whatever device you have at home, and it does feel invasive. And yeah, it's interesting how this technology is becoming very popular.
Mm.
Yeah. And have you experienced living in a smart home, or have you heard strange sort of noises from any gadgets you have at home that may have inspired any events in the book?
No, I've never lived in a smart home, but my partner's two children, who are in their 30s, share a smart home. And so one of them set it up because he's an electrician, and he was living there on his own at the time, and he set it up for himself, which is great. But then his sister moved in, and she took technology on board, and she would tell us the stories of things that happened that weren't anything sinister, or the system wasn't playing up or anything, but just because she wasn't used to it. Like, for instance, it was set up so you can walk through the whole house, and the lights come on and off as you walk through. And the first time she was there after dark, she was on her own, and the lights weren't coming on because it turned out that her brother's a lot taller than her, and he'd set the sensors for his height, and they weren't picking her up. And I think there's sort of issues there, because I think a lot of technology is more male friendly than female friendly. There are issues someone was saying about with Alexa, it doesn't always pick up a female voice as well as it picks up a male voice. So yeah, there are issues with that, and I think a lot. I'm being quite gender biased here, but I think it's naturally more of a male thing generally than for women. So I want to, or perhaps I'm just projecting myself onto that again. So I wanted to look at how it could be quite alienating if someone, if your partner's set it up and you're not actually so keen on it, having to get to grips with it. And this is part of the problem that I'd been reading about, that in cases of domestic abuse, one person had set it up and they knew all the passwords, and you can override it, but you need a certain amount of know-how to be able to do that.
Oh wow, okay, that's very interesting, because I have to say, I'm not very knowledgeable on smart technology, but it that's really quite shocking that actually it is more kind of in favor of men than women, as you say, with the light sensors picking up a taller height, or I guess Alexa picking up a stronger pitch of voice. And so it's almost like it's against women, or it's built against, but no. It's quite hopefully not not purposefully,
No.
but it's oh my gosh. So and actually there were moments in the book, actually, as you were talking, I was reminded of certain moments in the book where there is a moment of a scary moment where parts of the technology behaves in a very strange way that instills you as the reader in fear and the character. Um, and as well, because you've lived in different places, Devon. I think you live on the coast now, and you
Yes.
used to live in Hampshire. So I can imagine, because these are very, I guess, rural areas with lots of countryside. Have you ever felt that sense of isolation or fear living in rural areas that Lauren experiences in the book?
Yes, and I used some of her experience, some of my experiences as Lauren's. So I didn't realise when I was first writing the book that I told a friend about it. She said, "It sounds like you and James," and James is my partner. And at the time, he was renovating his old family home in the country where he grew up, and our plan was to move there. And I was a bit iffy because I've never lived properly in the countryside before. I've lived in sort of rural areas, but sort of more in sort of suburban or village locations. But out here, it is proper countryside, and so yeah, I didn't realise when I was writing it that I was actually tapping into my own fears. And for instance, in here, you hear some really strange noises, and there's lots of fireplaces, and there are birds nesting at the top or roosting at the top of every fireplace, and just hear such strange noises that come through them. So that bothers me at the time. And there's even a scene where Lauren's scared because she can hear tapping on the window, and there's actually a window right here, which I had the same problem. I could hear this tapping noise on the window, like fingertips, and it was actually a rose that was in front of the window, and the thorns of the rose were tapping on the window. But yeah, I'm very easily spooked. So yeah, there's a lot of and what happened to Lauren would absolutely scare the life out of me. So I really tapped into my own fears there.
Oh gosh, yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I'm easily spooked, and as I was reading, I was kind of reminded of why I wouldn't do well living in a rural, remote area. Because as you said, those little things like a branch tapping on the window, or maybe something you hear outside, like you hear all kinds of strange noises sometimes,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're kind of wondering, oh gosh, is that a bird, or is that somebody,
Yeah,
out
that's
there?
the thing. And also, there are no street lights here and no pavement, so that it does sort of ramp up the fear factor a bit if you're that way inclined. So after dark, it is properly dark.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I'm not too used to living here in London. Yeah. And in the book, at one point, Lauren says, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, which links into the theme of surveillance and paranoia in the novel. And often as I was reading, I felt like, oh, there's a real kind of Orwellian atmosphere, that feeling of being spied on. Why was this an important issue or theme for you to explore in the novel?
I think because there's so much surveillance now. There are cameras everywhere, and on our devices, they have cameras and microphones built in. Um, and I think the technology is making it, I know it's making me more suspicious, like things like the media mobile phone hacking scandal, the scam emails and texts and phone calls that seem to be quite prevalent at the moment. And I think it's safer to be a bit suspicious, but it's kind of about crossing a line, really. And the danger is when it's ramped up, so a person feels paranoid. But the whole area of being watched, I mean, hidden cameras can be so, they're so discreet now. I mean, you wouldn't know. I mean, unless you live in a minimalist home, someone could hide camera or a microphone in your home, and you may not see it at all. So it's again tapping into those fears of things that probably wouldn't happen to most of us, but they could do. And what if they did?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's like, and it's true, anyone can install, because they're so small these days, as you said, and anyone can really install something and you would never know. And that's what's, I think, really frightening often. And do you think a lot of people now in society feel like they're being watched and surveyed, um, and fearful of that?
Yes, I mean, it's a tricky one really, because the cameras are there to protect us out and about. So in theory, we should feel safer, but I wonder if it feeds into bigger issues such as suspicions of people in power, like politicians and things like that. And it's easier for conspiracy theories to take hold now with the internet. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of having having a balanced view to it. It's just a question in the book of where things start happening, and then it builds up and builds up and builds up to the point where it can't be ignored.
Absolutely. And that idea of a line needs to be drawn somewhere where we can still maintain our privacy and have a right over that, our privacy. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So we've been in a pandemic the last 18 months. Has the pandemic inspired you to explore any particular themes in future novels?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting because during the first lockdown, I had an idea for a novel which was a locked room mystery, or a murder mystery. Um, and I talked to my editor about it, and she said that they're actually seeing more of those sort of claustrophobic, quite closed, locked room themed stories coming through, which I didn't connect mine with the pandemic. But actually, maybe subconsciously, that's what I was thinking, because we are all quite isolated and living, or we were back. That was back in the first lockdown. We were living, quite more closed off lives. So yeah, perhaps that sort of tapped something in me. So yeah, that's something that I'd like to develop and work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with everyone feeling like that, the claustrophobia, wanting to get out, that I think that feels very topical for future books.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and actually this one as well. Although I started writing it before the pandemic, it has got a bit of a lockdown theme in that Lauren is quite isolated, and the story kind of asks the question of should she have put herself in that position where she was shut off from the world, and she did it because of her the stalking issue that she'd had. But in doing that, she'd closed herself off and then made herself isolated. And so, yeah, isolation is another theme in that, which feeds into the whole pandemic lockdown scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And also her fear of going out and leaving the house, and or not leaving the house, but or well, actually she is wanting to get out the house and kind of escape, but
Mm.
also kind of wanting to stay indoors,
Mm.
and yeah, feeling disconnected from people, which is how people are feeling now in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And are you working on anything new at the moment? Are you able to give us any hints about any future novels or stories that you're working on?
Yes, my third book is about a woman who joins a book club, and but she doesn't actually enjoy reading books. She's not much of a reader. That her only reason for joining the book club is because it's in quite an affluent area, and she wants to find herself a husband who's quite rich. And she thinks that if she goes around these all the different homes of this female book group, that she can suss out a nice home and find herself a husband, and also check out whether any of the wives would be pliable or meek enough that she can shove them aside. And so it gets quite out of hand with this woman, and how far she's prepared to go, and how far the woman who turns out to be her target is prepared to go to protect what's hers. But I'm enjoying writing that, because means I can indulge my love of books. So the women talk a lot about books, and books are a very central theme to the story, because often there's sort of hidden messages in the books about how these women are living their lives.
Oh, okay. Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll definitely look forward to that one being published. It sounds really good and kind of along the similar lines of this book. So I look forward to that one. And are you able to tell us, where is your book available to buy for everyone watching today? So where can people buy a copy of Leave the Lights On?
It's available online. You can order it in any, the likes of Waterstones online or in store. You can also order it through independent bookshops right across the country. Obviously, it's on Amazon and bookshop.org, and lots of, pretty much anywhere you can order it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm afraid we've run out of time for today, which is such a shame, because I feel like that half an hour went really quickly and there's so much more I could ask you. But I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. And we've had one comment. So Amanda Marshall, she said, great interview. So thank you so much, Egan, for joining us today and for talking to me about your book. And again, for everybody watching, it's Leave the Lights On. Grab a copy. It's fantastic and it's a great read. So thank you so much, Egan, for talking to us. We really appreciate your time and for answering all of our questions about your new novel. And thank you to everyone who has been watching, commenting, and we really appreciate you joining today as well. If you enjoyed today's event, then please join us for the next Culture by Lunch's author event this Friday on Facebook, where we will be talking to Aliyah Ali Assad from 1 p.m. to 1:45 p.m. about her new book, Would I Lie to You? So you can find the link and details for that event on Hillingdon Library's website. So that's this Friday. And a recording of this session today will be available on our Facebook page. So again, Egan, thank you so much for joining us, and have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you so much.